Think of a primitive workshop without lamps, without organized benches, much less digital designs 55,000 years ago. Just the rough hands of a young Homo sapiens squatting beside a crackling fire, holding a seemingly ordinary stone. The smell of burning wood mingles with the damp aroma of the cave. In the distance, the wind whistles through cracks in the rocks, but he doesn't even notice. His mind is immersed in an almost meditative state, and in his eyes shines the same spark that one day lit up Steve Jobs' vision when he conceived the first iPhone. His fingers explore every texture of the stone, identifying fracture lines, stress points, possibilities hidden in the crystalline structure. He doesn't know molecular physics, but he intuitively understands how force propagates through matter. It's pure empirical knowledge, distilled through thousands of trials and errors. What he's about to create will change the course of humanity forever. Because there, in that primitive moment, without Wi-Fi, without electricity, without the slightest idea of what silicon would be, this ancestor of ours is about to launch history's first startup. A company that never had a name, never had a logo, but whose products we still use today. A company whose only venture capital was the survival of the species. How did a species without writing, without universities, without Google, manage to create the most revolutionary technologies that ever existed? And why, deep down, are we still exactly like them? Why do the CEO of the world's most valuable company and a hunter-gatherer from 40,000 years ago share the same neural circuits for innovation? History's first disruptor. We are somewhere in East Africa, approximately 2.6 million years ago. The setting is a dry savanna, punctuated by solitary acacia trees and cut by seasonal rivers. It's a hostile world where every day is a complex negotiation between opportunity and danger. Homo habilis, literally skillful man, has just done something no other animal had ever managed before. He didn't just use a tool, he designed one. Other primates used branches to fish for termites, stones to crack nuts. But this was opportunistic use, seeing a ready-made tool in nature and applying it to an immediate problem. What habilis did was different. He looked at a common stone and saw potential. He envisioned a transformation. He imagined a functionality that didn't yet exist in the physical world. Archaeologists Mary and Louis Leakey discovered the first evidence of this ancestral apple in Tanzania's Olduvai Gorge. Chopping tools, intentionally flaked stones with specific cutting edges. Each required between 15 to 30 precise strikes to be created. Seems simple. Think again. To create this tool, our ancestor needed something no chimpanzee, however intelligent, fully possesses: perspective thinking. He looked at a common stone and saw a knife. He envisioned the future. He imagined a functionality that didn't yet exist. More than that, he was able to maintain that mental image stable long enough to execute a complex modification plan. Dr. Dietrich Stout from Emory University spent years studying the flaking process. He connected electrodes to modern volunteers as they learned to make stone tools, mapping which brain regions activated during the process. It's not just banging rock against rock, he explains. It requires three-dimensional spatial planning, complex motor coordination involving the entire body, an intuitive understanding of applied physics, and most importantly, the ability to maintain a mental image of the final product throughout the process, even when it looks nothing like the desired goal. It was like coding, but using physical force and intuition. Every strike calculated, every flake removed with purpose. The angle had to be exact, too shallow and the stone wouldn't flake, too steep and it would shatter uselessly. The force had to be controlled, too weak and nothing happened, too strong and it destroyed hours of work. Humanity's first hardware developed through trial, error, and tireless obsession with improvement. And here's a fascinating connection. When neuroscientists study modern programmers writing code, they observe the same brain activation patterns. The regions responsible for sequential planning, spatial visualization, and fine motor coordination, the same ones our ancestors used to flake stones. Steve Wozniak creating the first Apple computer and a Homo habilis creating his first tool were literally using the same mental software, the Paleolithic CEO. But every great technology needs a visionary who sees beyond immediate functionality. And 1.7 million years ago, the true genius of Paleolithic innovation appeared, Homo erectus. If habilis was the brilliant programmer working alone in his garage, Erectus was the visionary CEO who turned a brilliant idea into a global revolution. They created the Acheulean hand axe, the most successful tool in human history. Imagine this, a single design that worked, virtually unchanged, for over 1 million years. It survived ice ages, continental migrations, dramatic climate changes. The iPhone lasts 5 years before becoming obsolete. Windows requires constant updates. The Acheulean axe lasted 200,000 human generations. But here's the real insight that should make every modern entrepreneur pause and reflect. They didn't just create the perfect tool. They created humanity's first industrial standard. Archaeologists find virtually identical hand axes in Africa, Europe, and Asia. Same symmetrical shape, same bifacial flaking technique, same ergonomic efficiency. The differences are so minimal, it would be like finding identical iPhones manufactured simultaneously in Cupertino, Seoul, and Munich, without any communication between the factories. How is this possible? Without the internet, without instruction manuals, without YouTube tutorials, without corporate universities? How did a species that had not yet developed writing manage to maintain global quality control for 1 million years? It was embodied knowledge, explains Dr. Susan Anton, a paleoanthropologist at NYU who studied Homo erectus fossils across 3 continents. Passed from master to apprentice, from parent to child, through physical demonstration and infinite repetition. It was an operating system, etched into collective muscle memory. Every gesture, every movement, every flaking sequence was transmitted with the precision of a religious ritual. And here's the existential shiver that should make us completely rethink our relationship with technology. When you learn to drive, to cook, to play an instrument, to use a new app on your smartphone, you are using exactly the same learning system that allowed Homo erectus to master technology almost 2 million years ago. Observation, imitation, repetitive practice, error correction, gradual refinement. No machine learning algorithm is more efficient than that. They were the first to understand something that still drives Silicon Valley. Form follows function, but perfect function demands perfect form. Every curve of the Acheulean axe, every angle of the blade, every contour of the handle, all optimized through millennia of direct and relentless feedback. Real use in the real world with real consequences. It works perfectly or you starve. It cuts efficiently or you lose to a predator. It lasts a long time, or you expend vital energy remaking tools. It was beta testing on an evolutionary scale, where each iteration was tested in thousands of life or death scenarios. There were no focus groups or market research. There was just the brutal reality of natural selection applied to industrial design. History's first social network. But technology without communication is just isolated craftsmanship. To become a revolution, it needed something more, a network. And 300,000 years ago, our Homo sapiens ancestors created history's first social network. It wasn't digital, it was oral, and it was infinitely more efficient than any modern platform. Imagine the scene. A group of 15 to 20 individuals sitting around a campfire that casts dancing shadows on the cave walls. The air is thick with the smell of roasted meat and wood smoke. Children play at the edges of the circle of light, absorbing every word. Someone tells how they managed to kill a mammoth using a new cooperative hunting technique, where to position the hunters, how to coordinate the attack, when to use spears versus traps. Another describes where they found the best stones for tools, explaining the geological characteristics that indicate superior quality. A woman explains which plants heal infected wounds, demonstrating how to prepare the extract and apply it. It wasn't just conversation, it was massive data transfer. Upload and download of critical survival information. Each story told represented years of individual experimentation condensed into a few minutes of narrative. Each shared lesson exponentially multiplied the group's collective knowledge. And the most incredible thing, this network worked 24/7 without a central server, without moderators, without recommendation algorithms, without invasive advertising. It was pure peer-to-peer, decentralized, fault-tolerant, self-moderated through natural social consequences. Lying about hunting techniques had deadly results, so evolutionary pressure favored honesty. Complex language was our first universal communication protocol, says Dr. Daniel Everett, a linguist at Bentley University who spent decades studying isolated tribal languages. It allowed not only sharing information, but also collaborating systematically on innovation. One person could have an initial idea, another would improve it with their experience. A third would implement it with their specific skills. A fourth would test it under different conditions and report the results back to the group. It was crowdsourcing applied to technological innovation, thousands of years before anyone dreamed of Wikipedia or GitHub. Every improved tool, every refined technique, every important discovery was immediately incorporated into the collective source code of the tribe and propagated to other tribes through intergroup contact. And then something magical happened that forever changed humanity's relationship with knowledge. 65,000 years ago, humanity's first graphical interfaces began to appear. Cave art. These weren't just pretty drawings made by primitive artists with free time. They were maps, instruction manuals, notification systems, visual databases. The famous paintings of Lascaux, France, were not a museum. They were technical documentation, detailed maps of animal migration showing seasonal routes, watering holes, reproductive behaviors, astronomical calendars that correlated stellar positions with natural cycles, step-by-step instructions for hunting techniques, showing approach angles, hunter positioning, coordinated tool use. History's first PowerPoint, etched into rock with natural pigments they themselves developed through chemical experimentation. Think of the revolutionary elegance of this. Without paper, without synthetic ink, without electricity, without digital backup systems, they created a data storage system that lasted 30,000 years and is still perfectly legible today. How many of our digital files will exist, and more importantly, be accessible in 2050? How many of our clouds will evaporate when companies change protocols or simply cease to exist? Humanity's iPhone moment. But every great technological revolution has its iPhone moment. The product that not only improves what already exists, but completely changes the rules of the game and redefines what's possible. For Paleolithic humanity, that moment arrived about 12,000 years ago, in the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East. A woman, let's call her Anna, because someone had to be first, has been observing wild wheat grains for weeks. She's not a botanist, has no reference books, can't consult scientific articles, but she has something more powerful, obsessive curiosity and time to observe patterns. She notices that the seeds always fall in the same places, that certain areas produce more vigorous plants, that germination time coincides with specific changes in animal behavior and star positions. A seemingly crazy idea arises in her mind. What if I planted this on purpose? What if instead of following the wild plants, I made the plants follow me? It seems obvious now, but think of the revolutionary cognitive complexity of this innovation. Anna had to, recognize subtle patterns in complex natural systems. Abstract invisible causal principles, seed, plant, fruit. Project future scenarios months ahead, plant now to harvest later. Delay immediate gratification, not eat the seeds today. Experiment systematically with variables, soil, water, timing. Accept the risk of total failure and potential starvation. It was machine learning applied to nature, a genetic algorithm implemented with her own hands. Scientific experimentation without knowing the scientific method. And it worked so spectacularly that it fundamentally changed the trajectory of the human species. The Neolithic Revolution wasn't just about agriculture, explains Dr. Ian Hodder from Stanford University, who directed excavations at some of the first agricultural settlements. It was about social engineering on a massive scale. For the first time in history, humans consciously designed their own environment, modified entire ecosystems, and created completely artificial social systems. The result of this innovation was more transformative than any modern digital technology. Humanity's first cities emerged. Çatalhöyük, in present-day Turkey, housed 8,000 people 9,000 years ago. To put it in context, this is a city larger than many current European cities, built and managed without a mayor, without police, without a written constitution, without a banking system, without formal legal codes. How did they manage to organize 8,000 people to live together peacefully, share limited resources, coordinate collective work, resolve inevitable conflicts, and maintain social cohesion for hundreds of years? Through revolutionary social design, standardized houses that promoted social equality. No family had a significantly larger or better positioned structure than others. Planned streets that facilitated movement and communication. Ingenious drainage systems that prevented diseases. Communal spaces carefully designed to promote social interaction. Shared rituals that created a strong collective identity. They hacked tribal human nature, our evolutionary tendency to form small groups and distrust strangers, and created history's first smart city, without digital technology, without IoT sensors, without big data, but with a deep understanding of human psychology applied to urban design. And here's the part that gives you chills when you really stop to think. We still use the same basic principles of social organization they invented. Our modern cities, however sophisticated they may seem with their skyscrapers and digital systems, are just turbocharged versions of Çatalhöyük. The fundamental problems, how to make different people live together, how to distribute resources, how to maintain order without oppression, are exactly the same. And many of the solutions too. The paradox of modern innovation. So, what have we truly learned from our Paleolithic ancestors? Why were they, in essence, exactly like us? And more importantly, why do we, with all our advanced technology, still innovate exactly like them? Pick up your smartphone right now. Stop and look at it as if it were an archaeological artifact from an alien civilization. It seems like the epitome of modern sophistication, right? A device that contains more computational power than all the machines used to put man on the moon. But look closer. Analyze not the device, but how you interact with it. What are you really doing when you swipe your finger across the screen? When you pinch to zoom an image? When you tap lightly to select something? You are using fine motor coordination developed 2 million years ago to work stone tools. You are recognizing visual patterns evolved to identify animal tracks on the African savanna. You are processing symbols through neural circuits originally created to interpret cave art. You are navigating through information hierarchies using social instincts developed to understand complex tribal structures. Every gesture we make in the digital world is a direct echo of movements our ancestors perfected over millions of years of evolution. Apple didn't invent the touchscreen interface. It merely digitized capabilities already encoded in our DNA. Steve Jobs didn't create intuitive user experience. He discovered how to translate Paleolithic instincts into modern pixels. Our brain is still fundamentally Paleolithic, explains Dr. Sarah Hrdy, a Harvard anthropologist and primatologist who spent decades studying the evolution of human cognition. We evolved to live in small groups of 5 to 150 people, solve problems with our hands, learn through imitation and demonstration, process information through narratives, create social hierarchies based on competence. Modern technology works precisely because it exploits these ancestral neural circuits. When a 2-year-old picks up a tablet for the first time and intuitively knows how to use it, swiping, tapping, gesturing, they are not being digital native. They are being Paleolithic native. They are using mental software developed hundreds of thousands of years ago by ancestors who never saw a pixel but who perfectly understood how to manipulate objects in 3-dimensional space to achieve specific goals. And here's perhaps the deepest insight. When we look at modern innovators we admire, Elon Musk building rockets, Jennifer Doudna developing CRISPR, Tim Berners-Lee creating the World Wide Web, what are we really seeing? We are seeing people who have consciously managed to access the same innovation circuits that our ancestors used instinctively. They visualize futures that don't yet exist. They experiment obsessively with materials and ideas. They build on the work of others. They share discoveries with the community. They refine through infinite iteration. They maintain intense focus for long periods. They tolerate failure as a natural part of the process. It's exactly the same process that led a Homo habilis to transform a common stone into humanity's first cutting tool. The primitive future. So perhaps the real question isn't, how did our ancestors manage to innovate without modern technology? Perhaps it's, why do we, with all our seemingly advanced technology, still innovate exactly like them? The answer is simultaneously humbling and liberating because it works. Because millions of years of evolution have refined an innovation system so efficient that no artificial intelligence, no machine learning algorithm, no computational design system has managed to surpass it. Because ultimately, every great innovation still happens in the same fundamental way. People sitting together, in person or virtually, sharing ideas, building on each other's work, experimenting with materials, physical or digital, failing repeatedly, gradually refining, until something magically works better than anything that existed before. Silicon Valley, with all its algorithms and metrics and digital disruption, is just a modern version of the Paleolithic campfire. Apple's office in Cupertino is just a more sophisticated cave, where modern tribes gather to create better tools. GitHub is just a digital version of cave art, a place where technical knowledge is stored and shared through visual symbols. And perhaps this explains why the world's most innovative companies still function like small tribes. Google limits teams to no more than 8 people. Amazon uses the 2-pizza rule. If a team can't be fed by 2 pizzas, it's too big. Successful startups invariably begin with 2-4 founders working in small physical spaces, sharing ideas intensively and continuously. It's no coincidence. It's evolutionary necessity. Our brains simply didn't evolve to innovate in large, hierarchical groups. It evolved to innovate in small, egalitarian groups, where everyone personally knows everyone else, where communication is direct and continuous, where status is based on demonstrated competence, not formal title. The eternal startup. The Stone Age Apple never had a logo. It never had an IPO. It never appeared on the cover of Forbes or had a CEO giving a TED Talk, but its products are still in your hands. Literally. Every time you solve a creative problem, every time you visualize a solution before implementing it, every time you learn something new through repetitive practice, every time you collaborate with others to create something greater than the sum of its parts, you are running software developed millions of years ago by people who never knew they were brilliant. You are using cognitive tools forged by ancestors who faced unimaginably harsher challenges than any modern startup. Deadly predators, extreme climate changes, scarce resources, unknown territories, and not only survived, but thrived to the point of dominating the entire planet, because we are all descendants of history's first and greatest startup. A company that started with nothing but curiosity and necessity, that iterated for millions of years, that pivoted through ice ages and continental shifts, that scaled from a few dozen individuals in East Africa to 8 billion people spread across all continents and even beginning to colonize other planets. A company that transformed common primates into the architects of planet Earth. And it's still hiring. Every child born is a new employee of this millennial startup, equipped with the same neural hardware that allowed our ancestors to invent fire, agriculture, cities, writing, mathematics, science, art, music, and eventually computers and the internet. The only difference between you and a Paleolithic innovator is the historical context. They used stone and wood. You use silicon and code. They created around campfires. You create around screens. But the fundamental process, curiosity, experimentation, collaboration, persistence, is identical. If this profound connection between past and present has made you rethink what it means to be innovative in the 21st century, please like to help more people discover that they carry millions of years of evolutionarily tested and approved genius within them. And subscribe, because we still have many ancestral stories to tell, stories that reveal that the future of humanity may not be in abandoning our primitive past, but in finally understanding it completely.